Hello and welcome to the Spiritual Intelligence Briefing. We are continuing the series tonight with the dreams of presidents. I got to tell you, this has been one of the most fascinating historical studies I have ever done in my life. Inspired by the movies National Treasure and The President's Book of Secrets. Uh, a long time ago, I was kind of dreaming with God. What if there actually was a President's Book of Secrets? What if, in fact, we could hand down from administration to administration a record of the way that God speaks directly to the President of the United States, all the way back to George Washington, where we had recorded and where we mined all of history and the diaries and the letters and the correspondence and the biographies and the autobiographies of the presidents, where we could find every instance where God spoke directly to the president of the United States, particularly in dreams, but not just dreams. What about visions, like the visions of George Washington or the very infamous dreams of Abraham Lincoln? And as we've begun to do this study, there are these surprises that have popped up in history where we begin to discover more and more and more and more dreams that presidents have had, that aides have had about presidents, that have resolved foreign policy decisions, been warnings in war, resolved issues related to even the Spanish American War, as we'll find out soon, and all kinds of things that God is doing and God is saying throughout history, where the voice of God is really, really loud to the executive, the chief executive of our nation. And what he has said and what he has talked about is absolutely fascinating. So tonight is really interesting because it ties in several different stories of presidents that we're going to, one that you should be very, very intimately familiar with, but there's a new twist. We found a dream from Lincoln that we can't find recorded anywhere else except in a conversation with President James Garfield. And so we're going to have a blast tonight as we dive into understanding the dreams of presidents in this spiritual intelligence briefing. Before we get started, let's say hi to a few people. Sarah, hey, you made it. You're on the live stream with us. Sarah from Missouri, it's good to see you. Hello, Tiffany from Tennessee. Busy weekend. Glad you're back in Tennessee. All right. Hello, Joe from Clear Lake, California. Hello from New York, Holly. It's good to see you. Trish from Wyoming. Haven't made it out to Wyoming lately, but man, I'd love to come out there and do some hunting. It's good to see you, Trish. Hello, Autumn from Brighton, Colorado. It's good to see you too. Hello from Texas, Dawn. It's good to see you, Dawn. Shalom and blessings. Hey, GC. It's good to see you. Susan from Colorado, sunny and hot. All right. Hey, it's Gretchen from Detroit. It's good to see you, Gretchen. Welcome. We're glad you're with us tonight. Elaine made it from Australia. Hey, Elaine. It's always good to see your posts come up and know that we're reaching around the world and what God is doing with dreams. Hello from Florida, Pam. Hey, it's good to see you from Florida. Have you ever interpreted a dream that Trump has had? That's a great question. Someday I'll have to answer that. Lolaine, hello. Hey, it's good to see you. Yvonne from Dayton, Tennessee. All right, awesome. Dr. John, you kept me in suspense today. we probably sent out the email late, and that was my fault because I edit those and make sure our team just does an incredible job of putting those together. But as I do research, I'm like, oh, well, this happened, and I got to tell them about this. And so I'm glad you made it, Gretchen. So good you're here. Awesome. A new president to cover. Yes. And we're doing another one. We're doing McKinley on Saturday and the juxtaposition of Garfield and McKinley. And we'll get into it. Don't get me started yet. All right. Hello, Susie from the Bluegrass State. It's good to see you. Say hello to Rodney for me. All right. Blessings from Papa from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. All right. Hello, JC. Stony River. Glad you're here. Laney from Detroit. It's so good to see you. I'm going to be up in Detroit next Monday. All right, Marisha, it's good to see you too. Awesome. Hello from England, Stan. Ash West. England, Stan. They're going through a moment out there in England. We got to be patient with them. I think they forgot what freedom and liberty looks like, but with our UFC fights and the stuff that we're doing on the National Mall this summer, we might just have to remind England what freedom and liberty is all about. So, hello from Louisiana, Mary. It's good to see you. Hello, Sherry. You actually caught it live. All right. Hello, Mike from Virginia. It's good to see you too. Yes, so many of us are family. So if you see people talking back and forth in the comments, half the time I don't know what they're saying or who they're talking to. Somebody will share something, then somebody else will respond, and I'm doing the show here and like, man, I must have missed the first comment because I don't know what they're replying to. But that's what we do. We're part of a community. We're a community of dreamers and dream interpreters. And we do what we call spiritual intelligence, which goes way beyond typical dream interpretation. See, they're doing it. Gretchen and Ash are carrying on here, and Susan and Autumn, and that's all right. Say hi to each other in the comments. I'm so glad we're here. We're a family. We're all together. Tonight is fascinating. Tonight is fascinating because it answers a question that I had that we know in our community as the central question. So the central question I was actually working in Hollywood on some film projects, and I had another friend that was doing some stuff in television, and we ran across a mutual friend that's a heavy hitter in the Christian entertainment and television world. And glad you made it. Glad you're here. And we started having a conversation about movies, but it soon became readily apparent. You ever have one of those business conversations where it starts out as business, but then you're like, are you like a believer? Like, I know you're in Hollywood, but is it possible you're a Christian? And if so, are you like a prophetic, charismatic, like tongue talking Christian? Like, you're not just like saved and go to church, but like it's really a huge part of your life. And so I ended up developing a friendship with this person, and they work in the prophetic community. I work in the dream community. And one day we had a conversation where I just said, you know what? Do we really believe this stuff? Do we really believe that God speaks in dreams and visions, words of knowledge, words of wisdom, and prophecy? Like, do we believe that that comes like straight from the throne room of heaven, like it did in the Bible days? We're talking Nebuchadnezzar and Pharaoh. Do we still believe that God speaks that way? And if we believe that, wouldn't that be the best intelligence on the planet? Like intelligence you could run a nation by, you could set policy by, you could end wars by, you could have national security threat assessments by, you could keep presidents and other people safe by that kind of intelligence coming from the throne room of God. And so that conversation led me to several years later, I had another partner with me, and we launched the very first ever Dreams Through the Bible study series. We did it, two of us together, where we kind of did the host and the co-host thing, and she would ask me questions and I would share about the dreams in the Bible. But we also did the very first spiritual intelligence mentorship. This was over 5 years ago now. And what we've developed into was the spiritual intelligence modules. They're college accredited courses. And we have spiritual intelligence module 1 and module 2. Why am I bringing this up? For two reasons. Because I want you to understand, here's module 1, here's spiritual intelligence module 2. We are starting a new class. Many of you have kind of sat in the sidelines. Some of you are new to the channel. Some of you are really getting into like the spiritual intelligence briefing, and you see the live dreams and you're like, what is this all about? And so I wanted to start tonight it started with how could we serve a president and the national security and intelligence infrastructure of the United States with the gift that we have to hear from heaven and decode and interpret dreams, as well as the prophetic. And it turned into the concept that I call spiritual intelligence. So I dubbed the term spiritual intelligence. Before there were books being written about it, before other people were starting to teach, we developed the term spiritual intelligence. And that's why I have spiritualintel.com. And so we use that to be able specifically to train people in how to hear the voice of God at a level like Daniel heard for King Nebuchadnezzar and Joseph heard for Pharaoh. Again, if you're going to stand before kings, if you're going to work for the president of the United States in this kind of a capacity, you have to be trained. You got to really, really know and understand. Yes, it was Anna Kate who I started with back in the day, and what a great friend and partner she was when we started the spiritual intelligence mentorship, and then she got ordained and went on to do some other things, and we bless her, and we're so happy for the things that God is doing in her life. um, but I continue to stay in this lane, and we continue to develop the spiritual intelligence modules to the point. Oh, thank you, Tiffany. They're life changing. They're really helpful. You can now get college credit and even earn degrees through our spiritual intelligence program, which is fascinating and it's fun. But I wanted to let you know, because June 29th, 2 weeks from yesterday, we are starting both a module 1 and a module 2. Now, we highly recommend you go through the module 1 to gain the understanding you need for module 2, because it's precept upon precept, line upon line. Module 2 is much more advanced than module 1. If you haven't had module 1, you'll probably be lost on some of the basics, but we're starting both. And so if you've been sitting on the sidelines, if you've been catching a video here and there, like the JD Vance video, or the stuff we've done about Lincoln or George Washington, or some of the recent stuff, or if you've seen Ash West and Diana Larkin and I do a triple threat where we take a dream, like an Ash dream, and we really dissect it, and you're like, man, how do you get to learn how to do dream interpretation like that? And that's a good question, because there's nobody else that's doing it. There's not really anybody else that's doing government level spiritual intelligence analysis on dreams. Now, there's a lot of people that'll share a dream, and then they'll give kind of a 5-minute quick teaching, and they think it's mainly basically literal, but they don't dive into the depths of what God is saying. And so they'll miss tons of intelligence. But we love those people, because when they put their stuff out on the internet, we pull it down, we transcribe it, we put it in our database, and then we compare it with a broad swath of what other people are dreaming. And if it's something that God is speaking about right then, guess what? We dive deep into it, and we say, we want to, if God is talking about the safety of the president or his family or something like that, then let's dive deep in. Let's pull all the dreams in and see what God is saying about a particular topic. And when we do, it's absolutely mind blowing what God has spoken through multiple dreamers, and we bring into our many, many teams that we have, and we break it up, and we do what we call red team, where we put 2 to 3 people on a dream, and they have to agree and hear together what the Holy Spirit is saying that means. And then we compare it with what other teams are doing in related dreams, and then we put all of that together in like a dossier, and then we deliver that intelligence to somebody that can action it. Sometimes it's the intelligence community. Sometimes it's people in the administration. Sometimes it's people running for office. Sometimes it's heads of CEOs and organizations, or the ecclesia. Sometimes it's the body of Christ, where God is telling us that we need to prophetically declare and decree things that then we see manifest in the realm of nations that are at such a level. Most of it I can't even share with you. Just because the work that we do, a lot of it is in secret. A lot of it is it's a depth of national security threat assessment that we don't want our enemies to know the capabilities that we have. And so a lot of it we don't share. But what we can share is stuff that's happened. God buries secrets in the past. And so as we dig into the life of James Garfield and William McKinley and Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, we find this explosion of plethora of information of how God spoke to them. And of course, their seasons are past and their lives have passed. And so we can go back and talk about the national security and foreign policy implications of McKinley's dream about the Philippines, which we're going to talk about Saturday. Or I can tell you about how many presidents who were assassinated had warning dreams potentially about their own assassination. Tonight, that's one of the things we're going to talk about. Now, you've probably seen the 3-part series on Abraham Lincoln, the dreams of Lincoln. Did God warn Lincoln? And then God warned Lincoln over 10 times. And we talk about the assassination dreams, but we also talk about the early warning alert system that he had during the Civil War, that he discussed with Edwin Stanton, who was his Secretary of War, and with Gideon Welles, his Secretary of the Navy, and even with Seward, his Secretary of State. In cabinet meetings, they had discussions about the dreams of Lincoln. How cool is that? I only say that because there might be people in the cabinet, we already know there are, that are having dreams and they're feeling like they don't have the tools and the resources they need to fight the spiritual battle that's happening, the spiritual war for America that is unfolding right now, that's connected, believe it or not, to biblical prophecy and to the history of our nation, all the way back to how God spoke in visions and dreams to George Washington himself. So it's a fascinating, mind-blowing world. But I tell you that to say, if you're hungry, if you feel a call to government, if you feel a call to national security, if you've ever thought of, man, I would have loved to have been in intelligence. I was going to be a naval intelligence officer when I was in the Navy. And you're thinking, man, I just don't feel like I need to go join the military, but I really care about this country and I would love to work in a capacity to help keep America safe and to see some things that God is saying in whispers, in the shadows. There's intelligence and things that God is saying. We don't believe that you take every prophecy and you blast it on YouTube or that you share every dream. And people can share dreams because they're coded messages. So even most of the time, the people sharing the dreams, they don't really know what they mean. But when God takes us on a deep dive into what these dreams mean, did you know that he will give us the times and the date and location even of threats against the life of the president? We knew the exact time that they were going to have an attempt against him. And through some of the things that were taken, I can't get into detail, both in the realm of the spirit and in the realm of the practical realm, the president was kept safe. And that's happened more than one time. That's happened more than one time recently in the modern world. But it's also happened in other seasons where presidents got a warning before they got shot or before they were assassinated or before something happened, like Abraham Lincoln. And so if you're like, this is so cool, like Gretchen's saying, this is absolutely intriguing, and you want to do more than just show up on a Tuesday night and hear a brief, you're like, I want to be part of that team. I want to work on a national security threat assessment level. I want to be part of a group of intelligence professionals that work with hearing the voice of God and exactly what heaven is saying in this time and in this season to further keeping our America great and keeping our leaders protected. If that is something you're interested in, then you need to say I, which is AYE. It's the Navy. Aye, Captain. It's what a pirate would say. So if you're feeling that, say I in the comments right now, because you are the exact kind of person that I want to personally invite to join the Spiritual Intelligence Mod 1 and Mod 2. If you haven't taken any of them before, start with Mod 1. It starts June 29th. You can see the scrolling at the bottom here to check out, learn more about dreams. Go to dreamlifedecoded.com. Go check it out. Click on enroll, and you can see all of our courses. But if you go down to Spiritual Intelligence Mod 1 and Mod 2, we go over the curriculum, what we talk about in class, what it looks like. It's extensive training. It's not like a 5-hour masterclass on how to be a dream machine, or people put together 2-hour webinars. And we love that people are propagating that God still speaks in dreams. But this is like a master's degree on spiritual intelligence. And so if you're looking at something like that, and this is resonating with you, we got Gretchen and Sarah and Sherry, and people are saying, this is resonating with you, arise and shine. Go check us out, Joe. Go check us out on dreamlifedecoded.com or spiritualintelligence.com, spiritualintel.com, dreamlifedecoded.com or spiritual. It's the same website, but dreamlifedecoded.com will get you there. It's incredible. It's yes, I wouldn't take the dream course before Mod 1. I would jump in and get everything in Mod 1, because there's things that we do in Mod 1, like signing up for Mod 1. You also get the Dreams Through the Bible course as part of Mod 1. So instead of doing the Dreams Through the Bible course, sign up for Mod 1, and that's included too. And so that's a special that we're going to run on this class season. Again, we're starting June 29th. Don't miss your opportunity. You're going to want to get involved. And that's all I'm going to say about that. You can go to the website. You can find more about it. But the concept of spiritual intelligence, what started as a question, has absolutely revolutionized and changed my life. It's put me in places in high-level government. It's put me in rooms that I've been like, I can't believe I'm in this room with these people. And time after time after time after time, we've seen things happen that we saw in advance through the realm of the spirit. It's absolutely fascinating. You will absolutely love it. I don't know anybody that's ever started with us and has regretted learning how to hear the voice of God deeper, even if it's just for your personal life, but even to be able to invest it in the lives of leaders. We've worked with major celebrities, musicians, Hollywood actors and actresses. I don't share most of that stuff because I hold their confidence in high regard. Producers, directors, heads of networks, multi-billionaires and multi-millionaires in business, and not just on the government level, but all over. So if government isn't your thing, there's still ways to be able to serve leaders in all the different areas of influence through spiritual intelligence. All right. Well, I'm super hyped to be able to share with you what God did in the life of James Garfield and some dreams that were had. And as we get into dreams, and I pulled up like 3 or 4 different books about James Garfield and the life and times and the writings of James Garfield and all of these things, and I perused through them. I stumble across so many dream stories, like dreams his mother had about him. And we're going to talk about that tonight because it all connects. It's so cool how when you look at somebody's life in review and you look particularly at how the voice of God spoke to them and their mother or their wife or their aide or their closest friend, and you can say, God was speaking the entire time this thing was happening, where this drama's unfolding or somebody's trying to take them out. God is speaking, and God even spared their life and gave them hints about dreams when they were kids. So let's pray and get started. Father, we thank you that you speak to us in dreams. We thank you that we get the privilege of hearing the voice of God in dreams and being able to interpret them and have a deep level knowledge and understanding of what you're saying in American history, what you're saying in world history, and what you're saying about our time and our season now. We were born for this time, not such a time, for this time. And we thank you that in this time and in this season, we have a president and we have administration people that are open to prophecy, that are open to hearing the voice of God. And Lord God, we thank you for the opportunity. I say that you would give the President of the United States, Donald Trump, dreams. J.D. Vance, that you would give them dreams, give them even troubling dreams, even dreams that they wake up and they're like, I got to get an answer on this. I don't know what it means, Lord God. And we thank you for the opportunity to be able to work with them to decode their dreams. Send them our way, Lord God. People in the administration, cabinet secretaries, people in the Senate and Congress, Lord God, governors, judges, all kinds of people that you've allowed us to work with before. We say we ask for more of that, and we thank you for what you're doing, even military and intelligence people. Lord God, that you would give them dreams, that there would be an outpouring of dreams in America, that people would be hungry to understand what you're saying in dreams and in visions and in the seer realm. We thank you. We know that the answers to everything that happens in our society and in our world today can be resolved by the knowledge of the kingdom of heaven. And we thank you that dreams are a direct connection right into the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. Bless this time today, we pray in Jesus' name, and may we be inspired by history and the life of James Garfield. Amen. All right. Well, buckle up for this story. This story is fascinating. One of the things that I got to tell you, I just love James Garfield because he wasn't afraid to ask a question. And the single question that he asked proves the entire premise of what I shared with you about the central question. And the central question is, could we serve presidents through spiritual intelligence? And really, the question is, would presidents be interested in knowing and understanding and decoding dreams at a level like Daniel did for Nebuchadnezzar and Joseph did for Pharaoh? And the answer that we will see today as we unpack the life of the life of James Garfield is a resounding yes. All right. A lot of what I have to share when I share about the life of a former president comes from multiple sources. So, what I do is I put notes together from various books that we pull up and that we study, books about their lives, books about their papers, You can go to presidential libraries and museums, and you can examine the papers of the president. I've been able to do that for Abraham Lincoln. Of course, I have a library card for the Lincoln Presidential Library, but I want to talk about Garfield, and I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going to get right to the point where I'm going to share with you the dream, and then I'm going to share with you the story surrounding the dream, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to share with you some things that happened later, earlier in his life, that may have foretold potentially an answer to the dream. And then lastly, I'm going to tie it into Abraham Lincoln, and I'm going to share the question that he asked Lincoln's son, who, by the way, was his Secretary of War. So this is going to be phenomenal and intriguing and fascinating. So if you didn't know, James Garfield, he was, I believe, the 20th president of the United States. His presidential term, 20th president of the United States, he was in office from March 4th to September 19th. That's it, of 1881. His vice president was Chester Arthur, and he was preceded by Rutherford B. Hayes. He had been a member of Ohio's 19th district as a member of the House of Representatives. He was a member of the Ohio Senate from the 25th district. And he had 7 children and a spouse, was educated at Western Reserve Electric Institute and Williams College, and was a politician, a lawyer, a preacher, and an educator. He also served in the Union Army during the Civil War, including the Battle of Middle Creek, Shiloh, Corinth, the Tullahoma Campaign, and the Battle of Chickamauga. So that's a little bit about James Garfield, just to kind of put in context. Again, what we're going to talk mostly about is the end of his life, which is 1881. He was put into office. He was inaugurated March 4th. That's back when they did it in March. And he passed away September 19th of 1881. And so I want to share with you a dream that he had that was really, really interesting for multiple reasons. And you'll see why as this unfolds. Okay. Now, there's a discussion that he has with Robert Todd Lincoln about dreams, and that's what I'm going to share at the end. But in late January, which was a little more than a month before his inauguration, he had written down a dream that he had in which Chester Arthur, now Chester Arthur was his vice president, drowned. He and a close friend, General David Swaim, had escaped a sinking ship, only to watch Arthur, who was lying on a couch, very pale and obviously ill, disappear under the water. I started to plunge into the water to save Arthur, Garfield wrote, but Swaim held me and said he cannot be saved, for you will perish if you attempt it. Now, many believe, and the writer of this particular account believes, it was his own death, however, that was often on Garfield's mind. Although he was by nature a cheerful and optimistic man, like Lincoln, he had long felt that he would die an early death. Isn't that interesting? Now, again, I'm going to repeat the dream so you can have an understanding of what the dream's about in context. And then I'm going to tell you some really cool things about James Garfield related to this dream. So again, he has a conversation with Lincoln. But before that, he was inaugurated March 4th of 1881. In January of that year, a little more than a month before his inauguration, he had written down a dream in which Chester Arthur, the guy running as his running mate as a VP, drowned. He and a close friend, General David Swaim, had escaped a sinking ship. So they were on a sinking ship with Arthur. The ship sinks, And they look back and they see Arthur lying on a couch, very pale and obviously ill. Now, remember that detail, very pale and obviously ill, and he disappeared under the surface of the water. I started to plunge into the water to save Arthur, which is interesting because at least at one point in his life, it's noted in his writings that he could not swim. So think about that. He couldn't swim, but he started to plunge into the water to save Arthur, Garfield wrote. But his friend, the general, General Swaim, held him back and he said, he cannot be saved and you will perish if you attempt it. Isn't that fascinating? So there's a book about Garfield that is really, really interesting. And the title of the book, I think, will tell you a lot about Garfield. The book about Garfield is from, I think it was From Canal Boy to President of the United States. And so, yes, Garfield worked on the water. He worked as a canal boy when he was younger. So interesting, he had a praying mother. And there's an excerpt in the book, The Life and the Works of James Garfield, the 20th President of the United States, by John Clark Ridpath, where he talks particularly about his relationship with his mother and his relationship coming up in the ranks of his like naval career. Some things he did on Lake Erie. Again, he was from Ohio, but the canal boats, we have a canal that's close by. I've been on the canal boats. It's a fascinating way that they transported people back in the day. But I'm just going to read you this excerpt about Garfield because I think it's fascinating. On the way back from Pittsburgh, a vacancy occurred on deck, and Garfield was promoted to the more responsible position of bowman, and the mules found a new master. See, so they would dig these canals, and they would have a mule tied to a rope that would pull the boat along the canal. So they weren't doing this for speed. It wasn't traveling like sailing vessels or like motorized vessels. They were literally donkey powered or mule powered. Why would they do that? Because they could carry heavy amounts of load on water much more easily than they could by like horse and carriage. And so if you're thinking, if you have cases of barrels of molasses and, hundreds of pounds of sugar or wheat or whatever oil that you wanted to transport downriver, how would you be able to do that? Well, part of what you would do is you would use a canal boat. And so they had to have drivers of the canal boats, and that's why they say the mules found a new master. So the ocean drew one step nearer because he dreamt of being a sailor and being part of being part of the Navy, being kind of an adventure at sea kind of a thing. And so the ocean drew one step nearer. This was not exactly the sea, of course, but after all, it was a little more like sailing. So it's talking about his desire to be on the sea. Up and down the narrow course, following all its windings, the evening star pursued its way without serious accident. And James Garfield stood at the bow till November of 1848. So again, this is many, many years earlier when he was a young man. Then came a change. New things were preparing for him, and all unknown to him, old things were passing away. Doesn't that sound, by the way, like Isaiah 43, 5, 18, and 19? I just think it's interesting how John Ridpath states that here. The mother at home still watched for her boy. The mother at home still prayed for her son and yearned for a fulfillment of her steadfast desire that he should be such a man that had begun to dream of him when he was a little child. An accident now brought him home to her. So it's fascinating that there's an accident that occurs on the boat that brings him closer to his mother because of some of the things that happened. And so it's it's just fascinating. Sorry, somebody's asking me a question here. So new things were preparing for him, all unknown to him. Old things were passing away. The mother still at home watched for her boy. The mother at home still prayed for her son and yearned for fulfillment of her steadfast desire that he should be such a man as she had begun to dream of him when he was a child. An accident now brought him home to her. Here's the accident. The position of Bowman on the Evening Star was rather an unsafe one. The place where James stood was often narrow and slippery, and in a brief period of time, he had fallen into the water 14 times. Guys, this guy worked on a riverboat, on a canal boat. He fell in 14 times. He couldn't swim. He has a dream of escaping later in life in 1881. He has a dream of escaping a sinking ship where his friend, the vice president, is sick and ill and pale and lying on a couch and sinks under the water, never to return again. And his first thought is to jump in and save him. Are you checking this out? Are you seeing what's happening here? I'm reading to you very likely why God gave him a dream about water and ships and sinking and death very shortly before he was shot and then assassinated. The place where James stood was slippery and he had fallen into the water 14 times. The last immersion chanced in the following manner. One night, as the boat approached a lock, the bowman had hastily awakened and tumbled out half asleep to attend to his duty. Uncoiling a rope, which was to assist in steadying the boat through, he lost his balance, and in a second he found himself in a now familiar place at the bottom of the canal. The night was dark and no help was near. He was struggling about. His hand accidentally clutched a section of rope which had now gone over with him. Now, James, pull for your life, hand over hand, fight for yourself, fight for another visit to home and mother. Strength began to fail. The rope slipped. Swim he could not. Jerk, jerk, the rope has caught. Pulling away with all his will, he climbed back to his place, and he found that he had been saved by a splinter in a plank in which the rope had caught by a knot. Does that sound like the providence of God? Why didn't the whole rope go over and he be stuck at the bottom of the canal, unable to swim? Well, because it caught in a knot, a splinter on the deck, and that's what held the rope that he was able to climb out of the canal. Such a narrow escape might well stir up the most lethargic brain to new and strange reflections. But to the active intellect and bright imagination of James Garfield, it brought a profound impression, a fresh resolute resolution, and a new sphere of action. He saw himself rescued by a chance which might have failed him 1,000 times. Might not this be an answer to a mother's prayer? Was it possible that he had been saved for some better fortune than this present life promised? He recalled the vague ambitions which had at times stirred him for a career of usefulness, such as he and his mother had in mind for him. So it's interesting that falling in 14 times, but in this particular time, like he's at the bottom of the canal, the rope's on top of him, it's still in his hand. He starts pulling, he can't swim, but because the rope got caught in a splinter on the deck, he's able to pull himself up and get back on the boat and live another day. But instead of being discouraged, he's now inspired. Could this been an answer to my mother's prayer? Could it have been that better fortune had saved his life so that he could live a life that he promised? Recall the vague ambitions that had stirred him to a career of usefulness. It's interesting because our current president talks about the Lord spared me and saved my life July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania, to make America great again. And whether you agree with that or not, it doesn't really matter. What matters is when presidents have a brush with death and they go through a moment where their own mortality is put starkly in reflect in front of their face, they think about God and their life a whole lot differently. And I believe our president walks with a much furthered degree of humility than he did before. So, absolutely fascinating that this guy, as a young man, had dreams of being in the military. He had dreams, I'm sorry, of being in the Navy, of sailing on the ocean and really seeing and understanding what a life on the water would look like. Now, it's interesting that this general that he mentions in the dream is kind of fascinating. Again, I'm going to go back to the dream. Um, in late January, a little more than a month before the inauguration, he had written down a dream in which Chester Arthur, again his vice president, drowned. He and a close friend, General David Swaim, remember that name, General David Swaim, had escaped a sinking ship, only to watch Arthur, who was lying on a couch, very pale and obviously ill, disappear under the surface of the water. I started to plunge into the water to save Arthur, Garfield wrote, but Swaim held me and said, "He cannot be saved, and you will perish if you attempt it." Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating? Now, we know the story of his life and his mother's prayer when he was a little kid. And we can understand that from his time on the canal boats. But it's really, really cool how God is so good. As we're seeing, God is very, very good. And he kept him because of a splinter on the ship. That's what saved his life. But we know that wasn't what saved his life. What saved his life was his mother's prayer. But now I'm going to talk about the week that he passed away. Okay, the week that he passes away, he has to travel and he has to go out of town. But before he goes out of town, he wants to meet with his cabinet. And so he meets with his cabinet. After he meets with his cabinet, he has a meeting with his Secretary of War, Robert Todd Lincoln. And we're going to talk about that at the end. But he always had, and Lincoln had this too, he long felt that he would die an early death. People that knew James Garfield knew that about him. And his friends would try to talk him out of this grim conviction. His only answer was the thought that it seemed to him as foolish as it does to you. And so he couldn't come to grips with why he felt like he was going to die an early death, but he did. By the way, he's 49 when he died. Nonetheless, he could not shake it. "I do not know why it haunts me," he said. "Indeed, it is a thing that is wholly involuntary on my part. And when I try the hardest not to think of it, of dying an early death, it haunts me the most." The feeling, he said, came to him most often at night when all is quiet. It was then that his mind would turn to his father, who died in the strength of his manhood when his wife and children needed him most. At those times, Garfield said, "I felt it so strong upon me that the vision is in the form of a warning that I cannot treat lightly." Now, mind-blowing the fact that he uses the word vision. Mind-blowing also that he says, when does he get this vision? In the stillness and the quietness of the night. If you're a seer, like many of us are, if you're a dreamer, like many of us are, a lot of times God will speak to you in moments of rest, not just sleep. Most of the visions, probably the biggest visions of note that I've had in my life, I've had in those moments when I'm drifting off to sleep, when my mind is quiet and my mind is still and my body is resting. And then sometimes I'll see flashes of things that'll happen. And so it's during that time, which is part of the seer realm, and it's what's called a night vision, that he has visions, and he has visions about his father. I think that there was a father wound here too. His dad died, and he said when his wife and children, him being one of his children, obviously, needed him the most. So June 30th was the cabinet meeting, after which was this famous meeting Famous in my mind because I got to tell you about the consequences of this meeting that he had with Robert Todd Lincoln, his Secretary of War. But the next day, the night after the cabinet meeting, July 1st, which, by the way, is my dad's birthday, Garfield had dinner with Captain James E. Henry, the Marshal of the District of Columbia, and invited his guests to join him in the library afterwards. As the conversation drifted, Henry would later recall Garfield began to talk about the times in his life, particularly his boyhood, when he had miraculously escaped death. Just days before, he had received word that his uncle, Thomas Garfield, had been killed when his carriage was struck by a train. Wow. You think a train car accident is bad. Imagine a train, horse, and carriage accident. That had to be brutal. Wow. The tragedy had brought back not just the memories of his near drowning years before on the canal, which I've shared that story with you, but the deaths of his father and children, and Lucretia's recent nearly fatal illness, Lucretia's his wife. As Henry sat in the candle-lit library listening to Garfield, he realized he had never heard him speak in the way that he did that night. This was July 1st. Garfield was, Henry said, undoubtedly dwelling upon the uncertainty of life. So his uncle just dies, right, with the train accident. It reminded him of his wife's near-death experience, of his near-death experience on the canal, a near drowning, and then of his father's passing. So death is kind of on the mind of James Garfield, July 1st of 1881. After Henry left Garfield, wishing to talk to Blaine, he decided to walk to the Secretary of State's house just a few blocks away. As the president stepped out of the White House, Charles Guiteau is his assassin. There's a whole story about Charles Guiteau. I don't like to memorialize assassins, so I leave them kind of like a side note in the story. We don't really get into the history of the assassins much because in a lot of cases, they're offended, weak men who carry resentment and bitterness and chose to take out a great man versus becoming great in their own regard. But he was turned down from a job in the administration. He held a grudge. He wanted to get back. He wanted to make a political statement. So he set it in his mind, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it. Charles Guiteau, that he would kill President James Garfield. So as James Garfield is walking from the White House to the Secretary of State's house, Charles Guiteau is sitting on a park bench across the street in Lafayette Park. Now, Lafayette Park, by the way, still exists. This was 1881. I've been to Lafayette Park. In fact, last time I was in D.C., I went there. I dined right off of Lafayette Park. It's a fascinating area. In fact, I think that's the area where the National Guardsmen were shot, was that same area. So he's sitting at a park bench in Lafayette Park, and he looked up and he sees Garfield. He stood up and he began to follow him. This guy's literally stalking the president. He stayed on the opposite side of the street. He had been sitting in the same park 2 nights earlier and has watched as Garfield left the White House by carriage. After half an hour had passed, the president had not returned. Guiteau had decided to let the matter drop for the night. Now, as he shadowed Garfield, he removed the loaded revolver from his pocket, carrying it stiffly at his side. When Garfield reached Blaine's house, now Blaine is his Secretary of State, Guiteau stepped back into the shadows of a hotel alley. Happening to glance out a window, Harriet Blaine caught sight of the president and ran to open the door. As he waited for Blaine, Garfield gave Harriet a present, a bound and signed copy of his inaugural address, and talked to her about the trip that he would be making the following day. Now, Guiteau heard all this. When Blaine finally appeared, he and Garfield stepped out together for a walk. From the alley, Guiteau, who had passed the time examining his gun and wiping it down, watched as the 2 men walked down the street arm in arm, their heads close together as they spoke. Garfield's camaraderie with his Secretary of State enraged Guiteau, proving, he said, that Mr. Garfield had sold himself body and soul to Mr. Blaine. So he thought he was controlled by him. This happens in presidential politics. If a president has a friend, people immediately think, well, he's sold out, he's controlled by him, he doesn't think for himself, blah, blah, blah. It's the dumbest thing ever, but it's something that the mainstream media continues to perpetuate to this day, which is absolutely ridiculous. And most of us have more of a brain than to even believe all of this stuff. But as he followed him, Guiteau followed Blaine and Garfield all the way to the White House with his gun at his side. He could have easily killed either man at any moment, but he never raised the revolver. After watching the president disappear inside the White House, he walked back to his boarding house through the dark streets of Washington. The image of Garfield and Blaine engaged in the most earnest conversation haunted him, and the hesitancy he had shown for weeks hardened into resolve. He would not let another opportunity to kill the president pass without taking it. My mind, he would later say, was perfectly clear. Now, it's interesting because the writer of this book talks about James Garfield. It talks about, now, James Garfield, as we'll find, is shot in the stomach twice and then lingers for 80 days before he dies. And it's literally the death watch. Like every single day, the media, the newspaper men are standing outside waiting for the doctor's report. How is the president? What's happening? What is going on? And he languishes in this state between life and death for the better part of 3 months. But I think it's an interesting side note because if you're like me, you're like, what the heck was he doing out walking the streets of Washington, D.C. by himself? Well, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln was deemed a fluke due to the Civil War. And Garfield, like most people, saw no reason the president should be guarded. His movements and plans were often printed in newspapers. Guiteau knew Garfield would leave for Washington for a cooler climate on July 2nd, 1881, and he made plans to kill him before then. That's why he's stalking him the night before, July 1st. He purchased a gun he thought would look good in a museum and followed Garfield several times. Each time his plans were frustrated, so he lost his nerve. His opportunity dwindled down to one: Garfield's departure by train for New Jersey on the morning of July 2nd. So Guiteau concealed himself by the ladies' waiting room in the 6th Street station of the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad, from where Garfield was scheduled to depart. Most of Garfield's cabinet planned to accompany him at least part of the way. Blaine was to remain in Washington, again, the Secretary of State who he was with the night before. But he came to the station to see him off. The two men were in deep conversation, and they did not notice Guiteau as he took out the revolver, and then he shoots Garfield twice. Guiteau was quickly captured, and Blaine recognized him. Guiteau was led away and said, "I did it. I will go to jail for it. I am a stalwart," which is part of the Republican Party, "and Arthur will be president." He didn't like Garfield. He wanted Arthur to be president, which is what happened. News of his motivation to benefit the stalwarts reached many, with the news of the shooting causing rage against that faction. So needless to say, people were ticked at the stalwarts of the Republican Party because he swears his allegiance to them and said that's why he did it. Among those at the station, by the way, was Robert Todd Lincoln, who was deeply upset, thinking back to when his father, Abraham Lincoln, was assassinated just 16 years earlier. This, by the way, becomes the second of 3 presidential assassinations that Robert Todd Lincoln is party to or witness to very closely. Garfield was taken upstairs to a private office where several doctors examined him. At his request, Garfield was taken back to the White House, and his wife, then in New Jersey, was sent for. Blaine sent word to Vice President Arthur in New York City and received threats against his life because of his animosity towards Garfield and Guiteau's statements. So obviously people thought, well, the vice president's involved because Guiteau named the vice president and he wanted him to be president and this and that and blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to go back to June 30th. This was July 2nd. And we're going to talk about how he was getting ready to leave for New Jersey. Before he could leave, he needed to meet with his cabinet. With Conkling out of the way, he had finally been able to establish a strong, if at times contentious cabinet, which was what he always intended. Many presidents want factions in their cabinet fighting one another because they don't want to be surrounded by yes men. And so if everybody just nods yes at what the president says, then he can't get any good advice. And so some of them, and Lincoln was famous for this too, would literally set up factions, almost like cliques, where friends that supported friends would be completely at odds. In fact, George Washington had this, particularly on monetary policy, which is fascinating. If you look at Thomas Jefferson versus Alexander Hamilton and how they had completely different monetary policies, George Washington knew that before he hired them and was probably the reason why he did. So he had a contentious cabinet that included both stalwarts as well as what they called the half-breeds. These were different factions of the party. The most prominent of the stalwarts was Robert Todd Lincoln, and he was Garfield's Secretary of War and Abraham Lincoln's oldest and only surviving son. So on June 30th, again, this is 2 days prior, as the cabinet was about to adjourn for the last time before the president's trip, Garfield suddenly turned to Lincoln with an unusual question. I love how this happens in cabinet meetings. I need to go back and look up the minutes of the cabinet meeting, so it seems like it was just adjourned or was about to adjourn. I wonder if this discussion made the cabinet meeting like it did for April 14th of 1865 for Lincoln's final cabinet meeting. So he had heard, he said, that his father had a prophetic dream shortly before his assassination, and he wondered if Robert Lincoln would describe it. Although a private and reserved man, Lincoln agreed to tell the story. So what next? What happens next is what happens next is absolutely fascinating because Robert Todd Lincoln is private, he's reserved, but now he kind of encapsulates the whole of his father's. There's an entire book, A Recollection of Abraham Lincoln, written by Ward Hill Layman, 1847 to 1865. A lot of what I've taught about Lincoln comes out of that. But it's discussions that he had about dreams, where he talks about dreams that he had, dreams in the Bible, different things like that. And so Robert Todd Lincoln is telling some of the stories that Ward Hill Layman tells in Recollections of Lincoln. So after he had fallen asleep one night, so again, he's telling Garfield the dream about was he warned in advance of his death. After he had fallen asleep later one night, Abraham Lincoln had a dream in which he later told his wife and an old friend, which was Ward Hill Layman, that a death-like stillness came upon me. Within the stillness, however, I could hear subdued sobs. Leaving his room, the Lincoln bedroom, of course, he searched the White House for the source of the weeping, but every room he entered was empty. Finally, stepping into the East Room, he saw a coffin that was guarded by soldiers. "Who is dead in the White House?" he said. "Why, you don't know?" one of the soldiers replied. "The president has been assassinated." Lincoln, now this is still Robert Todd Lincoln telling the story to James Garfield in a cabinet meeting. Lincoln had believed deeply in dreams and seeing in them omens which he dared not ignore. After having an ugly dream about their son, he advised his wife to put Tad's pistol away and lock the gun cabinet. We've talked about that dream, another warning dream. Another time, while in Richmond, Virginia, he had asked her, his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, to return to Washington after he had dreamt that the White House was on fire. Okay, I've been able to find no other source for that dream. It's just in the retelling 16 years later of Robert Todd Lincoln answering a question to James Garfield, "Did your dad ever dream about his own demise?" He tells the story about the White House fire dream. That is incredible and amazing. And by the way, there was a White House fire, and I think there was a White House fire during Lincoln's time, during Lincoln's tenure. I believe it was in the stables, and he went out and rescued the horses. I got to go back and check my history on that. But incredible that he dreamt about a White House fire. I wonder if it happened before or after that dream. We don't know. When questioned about his belief in dreams, Lincoln had often cited the Bible as support. Dreams through the Bible, yeah. He pointed to Jacob's dream in Genesis 28, as well as several other chapters in the Old and New Testament. Those passages, he said, reveal God's meaning in dreams. Now, again, this is the Secretary of War, the son of one of the most famous presidents ever, sharing with the current president 2 days before he's assassinated that, yes, his dad had been warned by God in dreams of his own demise. Although Garfield did not share Lincoln's reverence for dreams, he had had a few that seemed strange or powerful enough to record. Got to find those. And that's when he goes into the story in late January, a little bit before a little more than a month before his inauguration. He had the dream where Chester Arthur drowned. So let's wrap this up. After languishing for 80 days, shot July 2nd, 1881, here's the account of his death. The following day, which is September 19th, 1881, Garfield, then also suffering from pneumonia and hypertension, marveled that he could not pick up a glass despite feeling well, and he went to sleep without discomfort. He awoke that evening around 10:15 p.m., complaining of great pain to his chief of staff, General David Swaim, the guy that held him back in the dream from jumping in to save his vice president, Chester Arthur, from the sinking ship. It's his chief of staff. That's the guy who he's with in his dying moments. Let's read further. David Swaim, who was watching him, and he placed his hand over his heart. The president then requested a drink of water from Swaim. After finishing his glass, Garfield said, "Oh, Swaim, the terrible pain. Press your hand on it." So he literally does what happens in the dream. You can see this guy in his dream. He's running in to save his vice president from a sinking ship, and you can see basically the general like grabs him. You think of like coming up behind somebody and reaching around and grabbing them and saying, "Sir, you don't know how to swim. You're going to die in the sinking ship if you try to save the vice president." Here he is dying on a couch, probably in his bed, sick and pale and very ill, which is how the vice president dies in the dream. And what does Swaim do? He's like, "Put your hand on my chest," literally like holding him back, like restraining him in this life from going to the next life. As Swaim put his hand on Garfield's chest, Garfield's hands went up reflexively. Clutching his heart, he exclaimed, "Oh, Swaim, can't you stop this? Oh, Swaim." Those were Garfield's last words. Swaim ordered another attendant to send for Bliss, who found Garfield unconscious. Despite efforts to revive him, Garfield never awoke, and he was pronounced dead at about 10:30 p.m. Learning from a reporter of Garfield's death the following day, Chester Arthur, the guy he saved in the dream, took the presidential oath of office administered by New York Supreme Justice John R. Brady. Wow is right. Are you kidding me? Like, do you see how God weaves the story? What are the odds that Robert Todd Lincoln is the Secretary of War for James Garfield? What are the odds? That, by the way, appears to be the last cabinet meeting that Garfield ever had. I don't know if he had any cabinet meetings after he was shot. Certainly the last cabinet meeting before he was shot, just like the last cabinet meeting that Lincoln had. He brings up dreams, and he brings them up to Lincoln's son. And the dream that he had goes back to his childhood memory of almost dying and having his life spared from drowning on a canal boat because of his mother's prayer and because of the miracle of the splinter that held back the rope. Are you kidding me? Guys, anybody that's listening, if you don't believe that dreams come from God and they are a key to the throne room of heaven to hear directly from heaven what God is saying in this realm, I don't even know what else to tell you at this point. Like, how many times can we prove this through history? You can't make this stuff up, guys. This is 1881. But it's written in the annals of history, these stories, how God spoke, how God miraculously saved the life of James Garfield because of his mother's prayer when he's a kid, and he believed that he was saved and set apart for usefulness in life, perhaps for some level of greatness. And then he becomes Congress and then Senate, and then he becomes President of the United States. And then he gets shot. But before he gets shot, he has a dream about a month before, and then he gets an answer from his dream, particularly. And the answer is he has a question because of his dream. And because of the dream, because of the troubling dream. Why was it troubling? Because he almost drowned as a kid. And he has a dream of somebody else drowning, and he has to save him, but he can't save him. His friend, who's there with him in his very last moments, is restraining him from jumping into the water to save Chester Arthur. And General Swaim was the guy with his hand on his chest moments before he slipped unconscious and never awoke again. Literally pale and very ill on a couch, dipping under the water, like the death of Garfield with Swaim there, and then Chester Arthur being the one that is sworn into office, is like almost like his dream in reverse. Swaim is there holding his chest, but he sees Arthur, the one dipping under the water, when really it was him that was very ill and pale, dipping under consciousness, never to awake again. Wow. Guys, this is incredible. This is amazing. Sorry I'm behind on some of the comments, but wow, you guys are seeing what I'm seeing, right? Like, you see how incredible and amazing this is and the history of this. And it just never stops. God is speaking. God is speaking clearly. He's speaking clearly to pray that our president and his chief of staff and his cabinet secretaries and the vice president pray with me that they all have dreams, because I believe that God is speaking. We already know, let's just say we already know some of them dream. But how fascinating is this? And you know why? Because the case is already proven. The case is already proven that God speaks to presidents in dreams. And in this account, the case is proven that presidents have troubling dreams, and then they seek out answers from other people like Lincoln's son and say, did God warn your dad in a dream about his own demise? And he asked this question 2 days before he's shot. Are you kidding me? This is amazing. This is incredible. Sometimes I feel like God puts these little breadcrumbs in history just for me, so I can go back and discover these stories, and then my head explodes, and it's like, this is crazy. Are you kidding me? And by the way, do you remember what the reoccurring dream of Lincoln was? It was a dream about a fast-moving ship escaping to a distant shore. What is it about God in dreams about boats and the Navy? Are you kidding me? Maybe it goes back to Jesus's time on the earth when, hey, push out the boat a little farther, cast your nets on the other side, storm be still, peace be still to the waves. Like, Jesus was a sailor for all intents and purposes. So maybe this is the kind of stuff that he likes to speak to us about in dreams. But he speaks to multiple presidents now, Abraham Lincoln and Garfield, about dreams of ships, about fleeing, about going to a distant shore, about sinking under the water, and that remind him of the dreams that he had when he was a little child, when he was a younger man, and he was almost killed because he fell over 14 times. But thank God for the prayers of a praying mother. Well, that's it, guys. McKinley is just as mind-blowing You got to come back Saturday and hear what happens in the life of McKinley. I'm just going to tell you, I'm just going to give you a teaser. There's not one, but two dreams of significance in the life of William McKinley. And we're going to talk about both of them. You are going to love this series. You're going to love the Dreams Through the Bible, or I'm sorry, the Dreams of Presidents series as we continue in the Spiritual Intelligence Briefings. By the way, join up and sign up with us for the Spiritual Intelligence Mentorship and become part of our team. But if you're a researcher and you really dig this stuff, I have a premise, and I'll just tell you real quick. The premise is, I feel like God warned every president that was ever assassinated. Abraham Lincoln, McKinley, Garfield, and we've recently found out that JFK was an avid and a vivid dreamer. Find me dreams of JFK if you can, or any other dreams of presidents if you can. But particularly, I've already started going through the presidential archives of the JFK library, and they say some of his dreams might have been recorded in his medical record. So I'm looking through the Navy records related to the medical record of JFK to see if any doctor wrote down some of the crazy dreams that he had. And remember, his U-boat was shut, or I'm sorry, his PT boat was sunk, was shot out from underneath him. And they spent, I think, 3 days on the ocean before they made it to an island. Again, isn't it interesting how God uses Navy and nautical and those kind of themes related to dreams and dreams of presidents, and in particular, warning presidents before their life would be historically and tragically taken. Wow, God is doing something. God is doing something in the realm of dreams. I want you all to be a part of it. Go sign up for Mod 1. If you're unsure, it is an investment. It's an investment of time. It's an investment in finances. It is 100% worth it every single time. But if you're unsure, ask God to give you a dream. Should you be part of spiritual intelligence? And if you get a dream about it, go ahead and do what the dream tells you. Sign up and become a part of our team and join us for Spiritual Intelligence Mod 1, June 29th. Until I see you next time, keep dreaming.